Our Wisdom Walks principle for today is this: pay attention to God's little warnings. Now, when I'm driving on the main roads and highways, I periodically go outside of the lines and hit those annoying rumble strips. Then I hear a loud buzzing and feel tremors all the way through my steering wheel. When I hit those rumble strips, they definitely get my attention. And while these rumble strips may seem incredibly annoying at the time, these warnings prevent accidents and literally save thousands of lives each year. I can't count the number of times my car has been rattled by them, and I've been jolted awake to avoid an accident.
Rumble strips have been installed on roads for a good reason. Driving can be a blast, but it also can be dangerous. That sounds like a lot
Especially
like
the way you drive.
Well, that's another day. But that sounds a lot like life, doesn't it? Jimmy, we're reminded in Acts 27, 9 through 20, when Paul shows us the importance of paying attention to God's rumble strips. I don't know if you ever thought of it that way,
right.
but we have rumble strips. Paul hears from God and warns his captors, saying, "Our voyage will be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives." But the centurion, instead of listening to Paul, followed the advice of the pilot and the owner of the ship, and the majority decided to sail on. But before long, a wind of hurricane force swept down from the island. The ship was caught by storm and driven along. We took such a violent battering that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. Then the ship's tackle. Finally, we gave up all hope of being saved. Great word.
It sounds pretty pathetic, doesn't it?
It does.
But it sounds a lot like life. And this story gives us a clear picture about what can happen when we ignore God's warnings. Paul, God's messenger and a prisoner, warned the crew not to sail. It was storm season. But the leaders were impatient, so they decided to ignore the warning and go along with the majority, to go along with the flow. And that sounds a lot like the way we do it in life.
It does.
We're given warnings, but we ignore them. We decide to do things our way, and we compromise. We do the same things that everybody else does instead of listening to God's little warnings and choosing another way. What if we paid attention to our conscience instead?
We believe God works through warnings to do these things. He wants to wake us up, keep us on track, and prevent disaster. That's what rumble strips are for. Wake us up is what we mean by this. Sometimes our defenses are down, and we don't see the small, little compromises we're making. They seem innocent at first and even harmless at that time. Other times we're blinded by emotions or think we're strong enough to handle any situation. Second, God keeps us on track with these rumble strips. The narrow road always leads to life, and God has an amazing adventure planned for us. Choosing detours that lead to destruction creates delays and robs us the relationship with Him that God deserves. And lastly, when we have rumble strips, Jimmy, God prevents a disaster for us and others even around us. Our sin always affects more than just us.
Sure does.
Somebody else gets hurt in the process. The military calls this collateral damage. Our actions always have far-reaching consequences.
And we've experienced that even in our own lives.
We have.
God speaks to us in many ways. Through our conscience, through other people, through the Holy Spirit, and through His Word. And our ability to hear Him and then obey His direction affects every aspect of our lives. When I pay attention to the small warnings in my conscience, I usually do the right thing. But when I ignore them, it usually doesn't work out too well.
Never does.
What rumble strips are you driving over in your life right now? God is trying to get your attention. So remember, be a wisdom walker. Pay attention to God's little warnings and stay on the road that leads to life.